Hello, my name is Zachary Stump. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm going to be providing you with instructions and performance examples for each chunk throughout this book. So let's jump right in and get started. So before we get into the recordings of the scale chunks, I just wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of an introduction to the bass clarinet, specifically when it comes to the equipment that we use when we play. So right off the bat, a bass clarinet is obviously much larger than a regular clarinet. And specifically, and especially, these long keys down the sides are much longer on bass clarinet than they are on the regular clarinet. This particular clarinet, bass clarinet, is a little bit bigger than what's in most student models and in most bands. But a lot of the principles are the same. The only difference is that it's a little bit longer, and therefore these keys are a little bit longer. It goes down to a low C. Most student models just go down to a low E, sometimes a low E flat. But because these keys are so long, they bend a lot easier. So when you're putting the instrument together and taking it apart, it's even more important to make sure that you really only are putting your fingers on the keyholes. You don't want to put your hand here, you definitely don't want to put them down here, because if they get bent, it's going to create issues with the instrument sealing, and that's typically going to show itself in lots of squeaks and squeals as you play. So generally playing bass clarinet, it shouldn't feel really different than playing regular clarinet. So if you take it out and you start playing it and it's just not working, nothing's really coming out, it could be because of the instrument itself. So band directors, it's always a good idea to have, if you're not a clarinet player yourself, maybe have a private teacher play through your school's bass clarinets and just make sure everything's sealing okay. On the same note, the mouthpiece and reed are also key parts of a good bass clarinet sound, and if it's a bad mouthpiece, it can really make it a lot more challenging to play. It's always a good idea to inspect whatever mouthpiece is in the case, look at the rails, which is like the thin parts on the side of the mouthpiece, see if there's any chips, dents, dings. I mean, obviously if there are big chips out of the top of the mouthpiece. But those can also create if there are chips in the rails, can create squeaks, squeals, make it difficult to play, a lot of resistance. And then last thing I would say is with the reed, it's not uncommon for bass clarinet players to play a softer strength reed than what they play on for regular clarinet. So if you play a strength 4 reed on regular clarinet, that does not mean that you necessarily would play a strength 4 reed on bass clarinet. And you probably will play one softer. I mean, if you've never played bass clarinet before, I would just start with a 2.5 or strength 3. Maybe that'll end up being too soft, but at least at the beginning when you're first figuring it out, you won't be also fighting against a reed that's too hard and too resistant. So when we're playing bass clarinet, 3 things I want any new player to think about. First, the neck here. So my bass clarinet is curved, and the neck goes like this, and it basically creates an angle that's like what a regular clarinet would be like. Sometimes older bass clarinets, and more commonly I see with school instruments, the neck just is straight. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can feel weird for new players. If it's, you're having a hard time making good sound or it just feels uncomfortable, you can always kind of, rather than keeping it out like this and it being flat, basically perpendicular to your mouth, you can always kind of tilt it, put the bell of the instrument a little bit more in between your legs, and as you can see, that's going to tilt the angle and make it feel a little bit more like a regular clarinet. That's the first thing. Second thing is, bass clarinet, generally, you're going to want to take more mouthpiece in than you think, and it's going to feel awkward at first, but if you put too little mouthpiece in, you're going to probably get a sound like this. And it's going to feel like a lot of resistance. It's going to sound pinched. If you're getting that sound, try putting more mouthpiece in your mouth. Put your top teeth further down the top of the mouthpiece, and the sound it's pretty apparent. That's just playing normally, but all I'm changing is moving my mouthpiece, or my teeth further down the mouthpiece. Third thing is, just generally when you're playing bass clarinet,
Not a lot changes with the way that we make sound as compared to regular clarinet, but you are probably going to use a lot more air. You might be breathing more often. It's a little bit harder to sustain things in the same way. So just, always think about really good breaths from the beginning, and you should be good. So again, just to recap, maybe try tilting in the bell so the angle's different, put more mouthpiece in, and take lots of good big breaths so we have lots of good air support while we're playing bass clarinet.